Williams.
And I'm Billy Thomas.
And welcome to another edition of From the Woods Today. Today we've got some fall topics going on, which is, it is kind of getting that feel.
We are officially fall, so yes.
We are, so it kind of has that little feel in the air, especially in the mornings. In the afternoons, you can't wear your hoodie that you want to wear in the morning time, but in the afternoons, you can go take that walk in the woods.
Yeah, no doubt. We're so excited to have our guest today with us and really excited to have you all with us as well. But we'll be joined today by Dr. Ellen Crocker. She's going to be talking about some of these fall mushrooms, some of the most hunted, some of the most maybe talked about and seen. So I always love having Dr. Crocker on here. She brings so much expertise. And then we're going to bring some water folks in, right? We've got our very own Dr. Amanda Gumbert going to be talking about watersheds and kind of what they are and all that we need to know about them. And she's going to be joined by Michaela Lambert, who works for the Kentucky Division of Water. So she deals with the non-point source, and she's on the basin team there. So we're really excited to have Michaela, product of our department here. She is a first timer, I believe. So we're always excited to get a brand new guest on, and we'll look forward to seeing Michaela here in a few minutes. But I think we're going to start off with Dr. Crocker today. But if you have questions for any of our guests, just let us know via chat, and we will hit you up that way. And if you're on YouTube or you're a podcast listener, use email forestry.extension@uky.edu, and we can respond to you that way. But we're excited to be with you, Renee, on a nice kind of overcast day, but it's
a little rainy, but that's okay. We need the rain.
We need the rain. So, all right, Dr. Crocker.
Dr. Crocker, come on up. Come back.
I'm just so excited. Excited to talk with you today.
That's okay. I'm really interested in this segment because, fall mushrooms. So the mushrooms you're going to show, does that mean they only grow in the fall?
No.
Okay.
A few of these can grow some other times of year as well. I'll show you. So I did, when Renee and Billy asked me to talk about fall mushrooms, that's exciting. And I know that the rest of you are probably feeling like me, thankful for the rain and the start of fall. And one of the things that means is that we're likely to see more mushrooms. Those fungi are there all the time. They're growing underground, they're growing in wood, but when we get a little bit more rain is when we're likely to see more mushrooms forming. And so at first I thought, well, let's just talk about all the fall mushrooms that people will see. And then I thought, oh no, this will take the entire hour. And then
I bet it would have been great though.
Yeah. Awesome.
So instead, I decided to focus on 3 of the most hunted fall mushrooms, 3 fall mushrooms that are in high demand this time of year, things that people typically would be interested in for foraging, but that you all might be interested in just to learn more about. They're eye-catching and distinctive mushrooms that I tend to associate with fall in our area.
I really look forward to that. I know we get so many calls and questions and emails and pictures about mushrooms. So, Dr. Crocker, thanks for all you do to help us manage all of this.
Yeah, definitely. We appreciate it.
These are some mushrooms that I'm excited about seeing this fall too. And hopefully, if you happen to run into them, you might know what they are now. So we're going to talk about 3 fall mushrooms that I look forward to. The first are the hericiums. So these are the lion's manes. And, each of the mushrooms that I'm talking about today looks really different. And this one is just exceptionally distinctive in my mind because it doesn't look anything like a mushroom. So if you're tuning in and you're like, hey, I thought this lady was going to talk about fall mushrooms, this looks like a weird pom-pom on a log. That's what this group, the lion's manes, look like. And there are a couple different species that you can find in our area. The most common one that I run into would be the one that's commonly called lion's mane. Hericium is the genus for all of these, though, so they're all going to be related to each other. And things that are distinctive about them. They don't have a cap like we tend to think of it with gills on the underside. Nope, these have these long tooth-like spines. People will call these teeth or spines. It still has soft and fleshy, but it just looks totally different. Here's another picture of that lion's mane mushroom, and things to note about this. It's got kind of longer teeth or spines on it. those white fleshy parts, that those are how the mushrooms are producing their spores and making more fungi in the future. They're pretty long, but they're in one big cluster. But we have other hericium species that can kind of look different. So here is a very excited me sitting next to the coral-toothed fungus cousin of the lion's mane. And you can see it looks a little different. It's still growing out of a log, but instead of being one big clump of those long spines, this one has short little teeth, and it's got this multi-branched form that looks almost like a coral, and thus its name. So this is another one that I'll commonly see here. One other one, though, that you might run into in this area, and there are others if you're in other places, would be called the bear's head tooth. And this is kind of a cross between the other ones in terms of how it looks. It's got those longer teeth on it, but in more of that multi-branched form. So just a few different ways that these hericium species can grow. So where do these things grow? Well, you're going to see it on wood. These are going to be growing exclusively with wood on decaying logs, on living trees, maybe causing some decay, so kind of a weak pathogen there. And when do we see them? So I pulled data from iNaturalist. If you haven't used iNaturalist, it's a great citizen science app and website, and you can see when are people observing these species. And I found that these are mostly going to be occurring September, October, November, a little bit in December, but you can find them other times of year as well. That's just when they're most frequent in our area. If you're somewhere else, that might not apply to you. This is going to vary depending on where you're located. But for us, those are the big months for these hericium species, these lion's manes. So how to distinguish them from other things? First off, it's got those teeth. That's a very distinctive. It doesn't have pores, it doesn't have gills, it doesn't have caps of mushrooms the way that we think of them. It has these drooping tooth-like spines, but they're soft to the touch. They're not going to be hard. And then form, these don't have a mushroom form. They don't have a bracket form. They have a little pom-pom or coral shape. And then where they're growing is also distinctive. These are always going to be growing from wood, either from logs or living trees, like in these pictures here. If you see them growing somewhere else, it's possible that they're growing out of some buried wood, but without that, that's a very distinctive thing for this group. So in terms of other things that you might see that look a little bit similar, there are some other mushrooms that have teeth. Other things like hedgehog mushrooms or hidnums, which you can see in this picture here. They look more like a mushroom. Like if you see them, here's a picture from the top. If you see them just on the forest floor, they're going to look like a regular kind of mushroom with a cap and gills. But when you flip it over, what you're going to see on the underside are those tooth-like spines underneath. Again, that's just a different way that this fungus has of getting its spores out into the air. Instead of making pores or gills, it's making these little teeth. But just kind of another thing to be on the lookout for, and not something you'd really confuse. They grow so differently, right? This looks nothing like the other pictures that I showed earlier. It just has teeth. And you might see other mushrooms that similarly have teeth. This is the northern tooth fungus. In this case, there's these really large shelf-like brackets that you'll see on the side of a tree. And it has little teeth on the underside. Again, totally different looking and not something you're going to confuse very easily. But just wanted to point some of those out as well. There are a few other species that maybe look kind of similar in form with a big cluster of stuff at the base, and we'll talk about those in just a minute. But number 2 mushroom to be looking for this fall that a lot of people will be on the lookout for are chicken of the woods. And here you can see a big cluster of chicken of the woods mushroom right there, this overlapping rosette of brackets. And there are a couple different species that we might have in our area. Depending on where you're located, these might be totally different. So just wanted to throw that out there with a grain of salt. But in our area, we commonly see what we'd call chicken of the woods. Laetoporus is the genus for this group. And when I think of chicken of the woods, I think of this orange on top and the undersides being a bright sulfur yellow. So here you can see in this picture, it's growing from a log. I took this photo just a couple weeks ago, and the bright orange on top, it doesn't have a stalk. Instead, you see these overlapping clusters on dead or dying wood. And then if you look on the underside, you're going to see this really bright yellow color. And if you looked with a hand lens or a magnifying glass, what you'd see is it's covered with tiny pores. So again, this one doesn't have gills and it doesn't have teeth like we just saw. It has tiny little pores on the underside. Now in our area, I'll also commonly run into a different relative of this one, and that is a lighter colored, maybe white-pored chicken of the woods. I'm not sure on the official name for this one. People call it different things, but I think white-pored chicken of the woods is pretty appropriate because instead of having that bright sulfur yellow color on the underside, it's really light colored. You still have the pores in a similar growth form. You can see those overlapping rosettes at the base of the tree there, but a different color. So a little bit more about our chicken of the woods species. Where are you going to find them? They're always going to be growing on wood. Now that could be buried roots under the ground, but frequently you're going to see it on down logs, at the base of a tree, on wood that's decaying. And when do we see them in our area? So again, going back to iNaturalist and when people have reported chicken of the woods, anything in this group, Laetoporus genus, well, you can find them in the summer, so you might start seeing them April, May, June, July, but it really ticks up in August, September, and October are the biggest months for finding chicken of the woods. So you might see it into the, early summer, but once we hit fall, there's a lot more of this fruiting. What are some key features for identification? Well, first, it's got those fan-shaped shelves that are overlapping in large clusters. Very different from how some other mushrooms grow, but there's a whole group of mushrooms that kind of form in this shape. And those bracket fungi that you'll commonly see at the base of trees, which we'll talk more in a second about potential lookalikes and things that might be similar. Texture-wise, it's going to be very soft when it's fresh, soft and maybe even almost spongy. But as this ages, it's going to become harder and more woody with age, and it's going to fade in color. So you'll see these later on, several months later, bleached out and white in color sometimes, and I wonder what that was. It looks very different then. If you look underneath those caps, what you're going to see are tiny, tiny pores on the undersides, but they're really, really small. So it might look just totally smooth at first glance, but they are tiny pores and always growing from wood. This is very important for mushrooms. Mushrooms like us, they have their food preferences, and some fungi will feed on just about everything. But other fungi are going to be pretty specialized in what they're feeding on. Some of them really only want to feed on a few species. Others might be broader, but really focus on certain types of food source. So in the case of these chicken of the woods, they're always going to be growing out of wood for the most part. So if you see them, they're on a log at the base of a tree, on a tree that's declining, on the roots of a tree, that sort of a thing. Now, potential lookalikes. One that I want to point out, also you might encounter this time of year, is here's a tree. This is, again, from maybe a month ago, walking in the woods, and off in the distance, I see orange mushrooms at the base of a tree, bright orange mushrooms. And my first thought at a distance is, oh, maybe that's chicken of the woods. You know, the time of year is right. Maybe I'm thinking optimistically in my head that that's what I'm finding. But as I get closer, I see that that's not it at all. These are in clusters at the base of the tree, growing from the roots of the tree, but totally different mushrooms. If I look up close, these are more of your traditional mushroom shape with a stem and a cap, and on the underside have gills. So totally different from chicken of the woods, but at a distance, you could easily mistake the two. Once you get up close, you should be able to be completely confident that they're different. And jack-o'-lantern mushroom is a toxic mushroom species that can make people sick if they consume it. And people commonly will confuse it. I think for chicken of the woods, really, this would be at a distance. If you're looking at a distance and kind of squinting at the color, but once you get up close, you can really distinguish the two. But another mushroom that it can kind of look like are chanterelles, which grow more in the summertime. They also might have this bright orange coloration. They don't really have true gills, but they'll have gill-like ridges that run down the stem. And so sometimes people, especially who are new to thinking about this, can confuse the two. And that's something no one wants to do. No mushroom is worth getting sick over and not a risk that anyone should be taking. So one more mushroom that I want to mention in my highlights of some sought after fall mushrooms is hen of the woods. So in our area, we have one species in this group, and you can see it right here. It is a polypore. So again, it's got pores on the underside here. You can see it here. I'll play this video for you. Growing at the base of this oak tree, growing in this big cluster. And just like our other ones, the fungus that's causing this is living inside of that tree, and it's there all year around, but it's just going to fruit during this time window when the conditions are right. And in the case of hen of the woods, these mushrooms are going to happen really in the fall, just a few months. And it is causing rot to the base of that tree. And they really like oak trees. So you're only going to see it at the base of the tree or associated with stumps or buried roots. So because it's growing there, though, you'll likely see it every year coming from the same spots. And so where does it grow and when? It grows at the base of trees, especially oak trees. You might also see it stumps and roots. And in our area in Kentucky, it is most common in October. And you'll see a little bit in November, but this is one that has a really compressed season. So really, truly a fall mushroom. And you'll especially see it associated with those cooler, rainy periods, just like we're entering right now. And here's a big cluster of those fleshy polypore fronds that you can see at the base of this tree here. So key features for identification: large, dense clusters of these overlapping fan-shaped taps called fronds. So that's what you're seeing right here. And then if you were to pull it up, you'll have lots of fronds that are attached to a single thick white branch stem. So this person's got it grabbed there, and you can see it's all coming out of that one stem. And then if you look underside, any one of those little fronds is going to have lots and lots of tiny little pores. So potential lookalikes for this mushroom, as well as maybe chicken of the woods and others, we have several different mushrooms that might fruit in these big overlapping clusters at the base of trees. Two other ones that are common this time of year would be a black staining polypore and Berkeley's polypore. They look different and have a slightly different texture. The black staining polypore actually stains a black color when you handle it. And of course, if you are looking for hen of the woods, you might maybe on first glance mix it up with a white-pored chicken of the woods. But for all of these, they're pretty distinct and different from hen of the woods. So, but other things you might see this time of year. So with that, we're going to wrap up talking about fall mushrooms today. hopefully that gets you excited about some of the things that you might encounter while you're walking around enjoying this great fall weather that we have. So with that, I am going to stop my share and see what questions we have.
Great. That was a wonderful presentation. Really appreciate that. One thing I do want to ask you before we start asking questions. So, is there something wrong with the tree in the first place that causes the mushrooms to start, or is it just it attached to that tree and the tree is okay?
Um,
Or
Well, I'd
could
say
be
if
yes.
you have wounding at the base of your tree, any kind of wounding is a perfect opportunity for decay fungi. And
Hmm.
today, we talked about mushrooms in like, oh, exciting, you're gonna maybe encounter this thing, and it could be really like interesting to find. Maybe for some of the people out there who are foraging, these are all species they might be looking for, which we didn't really talk about today. I think it's just really fun to find these because they appear just like magic on these fall days. But the flip side of that is what they're doing in the tree. So that's nothing good. So if you
Oh,
have
uh-oh.
fungi that are growing from a trunk or the base of a living tree, those are going to be causing rot and decay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, maybe they're just taking advantage of a little dead pocket in the tree. They're not going to drive death of that tree. Some can be more significant than others, but certainly they're going to be causing some decline, some decay, or they're just feeding off of dead wood. Like with logs in the forest, they're breaking down that dead wood. That's what they do. And in terms of how they got there, once the tree's dead and it's a log, there's ample opportunity. It's a banquet for all the fungi and insects out there. They're all going to take advantage
It's
of
a
that.
party. It's a
It's a
party.
party. It's a dinner party. But when they are living, those trees are typically pretty good at walling off fungi. So they have thick bark and they have different defensive compounds that they would use to prevent those fungi from getting in.
Mm-hmm.
But if you have wounding, so any kind of dinging up of the base of the tree, anything that's happening there could be a great way for those decay fungi to get in there. Some of the ones that we talked about, but lots of others as well.
Well,
I know when you were talking about the hedgehog mushroom, someone asked if is cauliflower mushroom related. So I'm not sure if those two, but that's what you were talking, what slides you were
Asparagus, the cauliflower mushrooms, you might also see them this time of year. I saw one just a couple weeks ago when I was out looking at some of these other species. I think the chicken of the woods picture that I mentioned, like, oh, I just took this picture. I saw a cauliflower mushroom that same day. They do look they look kind of similar at a distance, but up close they look very different and are totally different mushrooms. But another really exciting find this time of year.
oh, yeah, I really appreciate it. You said you were just going to show us three mushrooms, but you really showed us a lot more, right? So
on.
I
Yeah.
I
appreciate
snuck
you.
some in there. I snuck
I
some
know,
bonus
but it was
mushrooms
good to
in.
see. It was good to see those lookalikes and yeah, those comparisons. So it was really nice. Looks
I
like they're
So
saw
can the
someone
coloration be a brighter orange for hen of the woods?
I
Was another
haven't seen
question.
that. And so the
Okay.
person who's asking, I saw someone asked about something that looks like hen of the woods but bright orange. My guess, and the thing I would ask you to check on is jack-o'-lanterns. If they're growing a big cluster of mushrooms out of the base of a tree and it's a bright orange, get up close, look at those. Do they have gills on the underside of the cap that are running down the base of those stems?
Mhm.
That the coloration growing in a big cluster at the base of the tree all makes me think of jack-o'-lantern. It's another, it grows really like big clusters of it right around the base of the tree, causing decay to the roots and the base of the tree. It's pretty common in our area. But again, get up close. All of these, I pointed out a few potential lookalikes, but there are so many mushrooms out there. There are
Mhm.
lots and lots and lots of different mushrooms. So that might not be what you're seeing either, but that would be my first guess.
So we had someone ask about puffballs. So I'm assuming, is that a fall mushroom?
Oh, yes. I mean, we'll see more puffballs this fall.
They're so
I
much fun.
they're so much fun. There's different species as well of those. Maybe a good idea for a future segment.
There you go.
And
And
then
our
I
last question is, should you remove fungi from trees if they're still relatively healthy?
Well, here's the big challenge is when you see a mushroom, all you're seeing is the fruiting body of the fungus.
Hmm.
And so when you see that mushroom, what you don't see is the much larger fungal body that's living. And let's say this is a mushroom that's growing at the base of the tree or on the side of the tree. Inside of that tree, you have a ton of fungi that are degrading the wood and feeding on that. And there's really no way to get rid of that. You can get rid of the mushrooms, but I would say the impact of that is probably pretty minimal. They are producing spores, which can make more fungi somewhere else. Typically, they're carried on the wind or the water to new locations. If they happen to land in the right spot, they can infect there and grow. And maybe feed on dead tissue. A lot of the things that cause decay on wood would be just as happy on a dead piece of wood. So that's how that works. But if you take the mushrooms, you're not really doing much about that bigger fungus that's living
Gotcha.
in the wood or the base of the tree. And unfortunately, fungicides are quite ineffective at reaching those and impacting them typically. And that's why it's so important if you have trees, especially trees in your yard, to prevent that unnecessary damage, any wounds to the base, even minor little mower damage or string trimmers can be a great way for fungi to get in there, and you can't really undo that. Trees don't heal the way that we do. They try to seal off damage. Now, I say
Mm.
all of that, and finding a tree in the woods that doesn't have a little bit of damage or some fungi, that's pretty common. And so this is not necessarily going to be the end for your tree. It depends. If you're talking about a tree in your yard and you've got concerns about it, encourage folks to reach out to an arborist. There are arborists with special training in tree risk assessment who could even help you determine, what is the risk that's posed by a given tree as well. So I think that removing them doesn't really help your tree. And if you do choose to remove them, make sure you're not dinging your tree up in that process because that could certainly damage your tree further.
Okay. Awesome segment. Thank you, Dr.
Yeah, really good as always, and really appreciate you, Dr. Crocker.
Well, great to be on and happy mushroom hunting. I hope you see lots of great, exciting things in the woods.
No
Awesome.
doubt.
Thank
Take
you.
some cool pictures and let us see them too. Yeah,
Exactly.
Yeah, please do.
All right.
good stuff.
Oh, good
Excellent.
stuff. Yeah. So moving on, we're going to start talking about watersheds. So Dr. Gumbert and Michaela, if you would like to turn your cameras on, welcome to the show. We appreciate you being on and tell us a little bit about what you're going to be talking about.
Well, thank you all so much. That was such an exciting segment.
I know,
I'm
right?
just all
You did
jazzed
so
up
good.
about. I'm
Yeah.
like, forget the rest of this. Let's go look for mushrooms and things. Um, no, so we're going to talk a little bit about watersheds and how we manage them in Kentucky, and lots of other little nuggets of good stuff about water today. So,
Oh, lots to learn
Looking
for
forward to
all
it.
of us. All right, really.
Looking forward to it.
I
Yeah.
appreciate having both of you all on, and Michaela, it's nice having you as a first timer. Yeah, we always appreciate having first time guests, helping us grow the audience. So thank you. I'm really excited to have you with us today.
Good to be here.
all right. Well, my guest today is Michaela Lambert, and Michaela is the non-point source and basin team supervisor in the watershed management branch at the Kentucky Division of Water. And that title alone, Michaela, is a mouthful. That's a whole lot, and I know your job's a whole lot. So let's start out with you just tell us a little bit about what you do all day.
Yeah, and it definitely does sound like a mouthful, but when it comes down to it, my role as non-point source and basin team section supervisor is really just to oversee all of the state's efforts to reduce non-point source pollution or runoff pollution. Runoff pollution or non-point source pollution is the leading cause of water pollution, not only in Kentucky, but also in the United States. So it's a major problem that we are trying to tackle. But if you're not familiar with what that is, because I think most of us, when we think water pollution, we're thinking about point sources, right? Things that are permitted and controlled by a permit. So if you can point to one source, one pipe, that is a point source pollution. Non-point source is everything else. So it's being carried by our rainwater and snowmelt into our stream systems and our watersheds. And so the most common ones that we're working with, especially in Kentucky, are going to be sediment, pathogens like bacteria and E. coli, excess nutrients, nitrogen, phosphorus, that type of thing, metals, so on and so forth. But those are typically what I'm working with day in and day out.
Yeah, so I'm going to just stop you there for a second because like that's a lot of stuff. And when we think about that, it's anything that's running off the landscape, like you said, that we can't point a finger at. So it makes it really hard to regulate and to address, even if we don't know where it's coming from. But also, if you're not familiar with Kentucky's waterways, many of our folks are, but we've got a lot of water here. Right? We've got upwards of 90,000 miles of streams and rivers, like give or take, kind of depends on how you measure them. I know some folks kind of split hairs about how many miles we have, but I mean, suffice to say, we have a lot of water. So, how do you go about managing the runoff? So you've told us what runoff is, and now we know we've got a lot of water. So how do you go about doing that?
Yeah, so the best way to describe it is we take the watershed approach, watershed management approach. So instead of looking at a stream system and focusing solely on that body of water, we're looking at all of the land use that's feeding into that system, so a watershed. And we'll get into that more later, but that's really the key point is we're looking at it on a landscape scale, not just the water body itself. And so to do that, Kentucky has 7 major river basins with a river basin coordinator assigned to each one. And that coordinator is going out into their basin, meeting with stakeholders, meeting with partners, meeting with communities, and generating interest and capacity to do watershed planning and watershed planning implementation projects. And then from my side of things, more in the office, we've got the 319 non-point source grant program. And so that program is a competitive grant that we offer. Applications are typically due in February. That often pays for those watershed planning or watershed plan implementation projects. And so we're typically managing anywhere between 40 and 50 projects at a time to reduce non-point source pollution. That's not to say projects aren't funded in other ways and through other entities, but from our end, that's what we're managing.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in and acknowledge and say thank you to Michaela and your team because a lot of the work that I've done and our soil and water extension team here in the Forestry and Natural Resources Department at UK, a lot of our work that we've done over the years related to water education and outreach has been funded through that EPA 319 program. And we just really appreciate that and appreciate the focus that has been put on education for all of Kentuckians to learn more about their waterways. So just wanted to jump in and say thanks for funding us too. So
Absolutely. And you know what, that brings me to another really key critical point of what we do, and that's water education and outreach. Our basin coordinators and other staff are always going out. We're doing water education events all over the state. So if you're hosting an event, give your river basin a call, basin coordinator a call, or give myself a call, and we can get somebody out there to talk about watersheds, watershed management, watershed planning, non-point source, all of the things. That is a major part of what we do because realistically, we're going to have the most success if we have people who understand the importance of their waterways and how to protect those waterways. We also offer educational equipment checkout. If you're going to host an event or you've got a classroom event, we have equipment that can be checked out of the Frankfurt office. We also have some volunteer monitoring programs. So we have a volunteer lake monitoring program where we train volunteers to do sucky depth and monitor the lake. We also have some new Tier 2 protocols coming, if you're familiar with that program, that will focus more on habitat and lake health, which is very exciting. But we also have someone that supports Kentucky Watershed Watch, which is a nonprofit focused on stream monitoring. So we do a lot of different things, all aimed at increasing our ability to abate non-point source pollution.
yeah, awesome. Well, let's go back to you mentioned watersheds for a second. Let's go back to that and really give me your definition. I always have a working one that I use, but then also, what do you think about from a managing what a watershed is and then how you manage them?
Yeah, sure. So when I'm talking to folks, one of the analogies that I use to talk about it is a nesting doll, right? So there are large watersheds with smaller sheds within them, and they fit within those boundaries perfectly. And so we think of, watersheds so much as like your Elkhorn River Basin or your Kentucky River Basin that go all the way up into the size of the Mississippi River Basin, which encompasses a significant portion of the central United States, right? That's a really large river basin. And so, one of the things is, though, if we're working at that scale, that's a massive area to consider. A lot of different sources to consider. How do we prioritize where we work in a watershed at that scale? And so we spend a lot of time thinking about what is the most effective scale to work and how can we build capacity to do that. And so we have those 7 major river basins within the state. Each river basin has a river basin coordinator, and they're working at that level. And then when we're getting down to the project level, we're getting down even smaller than that to focus, really hone in on a location and doing smaller watershed scale projects. So our watershed planning projects and watershed plan implementation projects are on an even smaller scale than that.
And so you just mentioned though that you have staff that are assigned to each of the major river basins. I still have always just been amazed at, like, to me, what a huge job that is to be a basin coordinator. Can you tell us a little more about what that might look like, or what those folks are focusing on based on those basins?
So those 7 major river basins. 5 of which are hired by Division of Water. So the Big Sandy, Licking, Upper Cumberland, Salt River, and Green River basins are all hired by the Division of Water. So they're out of the Frankfurt office. We also contract out the Four Rivers position, and then the Kentucky River Basin is funded through the Kentucky River Authority, and it's actually housed through UK, Kentucky Water Research Institute. So that's where those all are. Even though they all have the same job title, what they do on the day-to-day can really differ because they're working in really different landscapes, right? They've got different topographies, different communities, different interests and needs that drive the work that they're doing. So the work for the Big Sandy River Basin Coordinator, for example, they'll be working in a mountainous environment that has been heavily impacted by mining in the past, potentially, or they're dealing with small floodplains, right? That's the area that we have to work with in those mountainous areas. But then on the flip side, in the Green River Basin, that person is going to be working in an area dominated by agriculture, and they have karst topography to deal with. So even though they both have the same goal and very similar work plans, how they go about that is going to look really different. And so that's one of the challenges of being a river basin coordinator, is figuring out how do you accomplish the work that you need to do watershed planning, watershed plan implementation with the challenges of the landscape that you're working with. And every basin is very different.
Yeah, and we're going to, just as a kind of a teaser, we're going to do some interviews with some of those basin coordinators. Like I mentioned before, is it's amazing to me how they go about their jobs, and each of them do approach it really differently. And so I'm looking forward to hearing from each of those basin coordinators, not only about the diverse geography that they're working in, but also, of course, everybody brings their own personality and their background knowledge into that. So so hopefully folks will be as interested as I am. I'm kind of geeky about that, and I imagine you are too, Michaela. Um, but we're excited to hear from other coordinators. Yeah.
And I think even though they're working in really different parts of the state, they do function as a team, and they're regularly meeting together and sharing challenges, sharing ideas, sharing solutions. And so they're always learning from one another and sharing information, sharing partnerships and contacts. So you might reach out to a river basin coordinator in the Four Rivers, but they may be talking to somebody in the Licking River Basin about ideas. And so it's a really strong partnership in that way, and it serves the state really well.
Yeah, it's sounds really similar to the way our county extension agents work together and collaborate and have expertise, but they really sometimes lean on somebody in another county to help them out, and it's just a really great network. for that kind of collaboration. And I'm sure you wish you could like triple the number of people that you had working on these.
Oh, absolutely.
But question for you, you mentioned that they're working together, to meet some of the challenges that we're seeing in our waterways. And so what would you say are some of the biggest challenges that these basin coordinators are really having to address?
Yeah, I think I could pretty easily say that this is the fact that these water quality impairments don't happen overnight. And so the solutions don't take effect overnight either. Oftentimes we are working in watersheds that have legacy contamination. And so how do we deal with how that changes over time? So we're playing the long game, and we have to be aware of that and have the forethought to think about what are the solutions that are going to get us the results that we want over the long run. And it takes a lot of patience to do that and a lot of forethought. We may be seeing improvement in watersheds 10, 15, 20 plus years after we started implementation. And so we have to know that going in. And it requires a lot of patience out of somebody to be doing that level of work and networking and project planning to know that you may not see results immediately.
Yeah, that can be, I think, some of the frustrating part is that it's such a lag time. There's such a delay. And then, we've mentioned talking to, providing education to the public about the kind of work that you and your team are doing. And sometimes it's really hard to get sustained funding when folks go, oh, well, we put this money in, but we didn't see an improvement. And maybe are there kind of some key things that you tend to remind people about, when you're talking to them, or if you get criticism, or even if you're, even, sharing your successes with your supervisors, how do you characterize that about I guess, overall the importance of the work that your team is doing?
Yeah, and I think it's important to break down how we view success with these projects, right? Because it may be a long time before we see that delisting. And by delisting, I mean taking a water body off of the impaired waters list. That's our ultimate goal
So
for our
wait, let me
non-point
just say,
source program.
yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, so that just kind of means that an impaired water maybe got a bad report card. Is that a fair
Yes.
statement? Yeah. So yeah, they're kind of
Yes.
on the naughty list, not of their own doing, but because of how we've used the waterway or what we've done with it. But so that's what it would mean to put some practices on the ground, right? And then
Yes.
see improvement and then get it delisted. So, okay, sorry, I didn't mean to totally cut you off there, but just want to make sure if our folks understand what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's perfect. It's perfect context. And that's our ultimate goal through restoration and putting practices on the ground to, eliminate that pollution source. So we do see a delisting, or we're doing protection, protecting where we know we have healthy water bodies. But those are long-term, long game projects. And so in the interim, we've got to have some metrics of success that are different. And it may look like new innovative pest management practices that help us achieve better results. It may look like new partnerships, either through funding or other resources that help us achieve stronger projects. It may be that we have new project locations that we have been unable to reach in the past. And so a really good example of this actually has been our Big Sandy River Basin was without a coordinator for a fairly significant amount of time. But once we did get that position staffed, we've seen some growth in that area, and that coordinator position has been able to grow new partnerships, establish a river basin team, help groups formalize into watershed groups. They've been able to help groups apply for funding. And so we've seen our first applications come in from that river basin in, almost 20 years. And so for me, I think those are those shorter term metrics of success that we need to be looking at. That's a massive step for that area where we previously had nothing going on. And so even though you might not see that needle move in terms of pollution reduction right away, you do see the needle move in terms of partnerships and community education and um, momentum. So that's something to
Yeah.
keep in mind in terms of shorter success.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes it really exciting. And for those of us who are, working in the water world, it's exciting to see, people locally get energized and excited about doing something good for their local environment, but then also to see that acknowledged by funding that comes, it's kind of a pass through from as federal dollars that come, to the Division of Water, and then those dollars are used to put practices on the ground, but then matched with local dollars. So it really provides, it kind of, I don't know, just funnels some funds in to get things started, and then builds in excitement and buy-in locally for the longer term. And so that whole watershed management approach, while it can be cumbersome, and some of us are not very patient with waiting for it to happen, it really, like you said, does build success in the long term. And so that is exciting to see. So Michaela, I'm going to ask you now to give us some like some kind of pointers. So we've talked kind of, I guess, higher level in terms of how you go about your day-to-day of managing this structure and this approach to watershed management. But at the end of the day, our listeners and we need to kind of know, we need to tell folks what they can do to help. And so what would you tell folks? What are some things that all of us, whether we're farmers or woodland owners, we're watershed professionals, or where anybody who's interacting with Kentucky waterways, what can we do to do our part to make your job better and easier, I guess, to get done?
Oh, that's wonderful. I love that you have asked this question. I think that if we as individuals have way more power to change our environmental circumstances than we realize. And so I do have some key things that I think would go a long way for folks. The first of which is if you are a homeowner, you should be connected to a sewer system or a septic system. If you cannot connect to a septic system, there are septic alternatives that are clean and safe. But if you do have a septic system, the recommendation is that they are inspected and pumped out every 3 to 5 years. And that's something that often goes unknown and missed. And so, in my end of things, a significant portion of our 319 money ends up going towards septic system repair and replacement or maintenance pump outs. That's a major source of human pathogens that ends up in our waterways, and nobody wants to be recreating or around waterways that have human poo and the related bacteria in them. That's not great. The second of which is going to be leaving your riparian zones alone. So that 30 feet or so that surrounds a stream, that provides some really important benefits. The vegetation slows down water, reduces the erosion that happens on stream banks. It also acts as a buffer and allows some of those sediments and other pollutants to filter out before it reaches our stream system. The canopy cover also provides some shade and some habitat for organisms within the water. So that's really important for temperature maintenance. Our riparian buffers are very important to having healthy streams and healthy watersheds. If you want to
That's my
go a
favorite
little,
BMP. I mean, by the way,
yes,
if
we spend
always,
so much
always a
time.
riparian buffer.
Yes, yes. I think almost every project will have a riparian buffer element. It's popular for a reason. It needs to happen. So if you really want to get into it, like many of our projects do, you'll end up planting native riparian plants that are adapted to live right along the stream, and they're even better suited for that job. But please, please, please leave your riparian buffers at the minimum, or if you want to, go ahead and plant some natives in there as well. The other thing is there are tons of things that we can do in our own yards. There are small practices like rain barrels, rain gardens, permeable pavers, those type of things that you can do at your own home that will reduce runoff and allow water to infiltrate rather than runoff. So impervious surfaces are one of the leading causes of increased runoff, right? Carrying more things with it. It's not infiltrating into the soil the way that rainwater normally would. And so we look for ways to store or increase infiltration. And there are lots of ways to do that at home as well. A big topic in much of the state is the trash within our streams, especially as ecotourism grows and is an interest. We want to keep trash out of our waterways. One, it's a safety concern, and two, people want to get out on a beautiful waterway. They don't want to be puddling around tires and trash and other things that are on the bank. So disposing of waste properly, making sure that it's going to the landfill, it's not being left out in the yard or on the streets, because then at that point it creates the opportunity for rainwater to then carry into the stream systems. And then following all recommendations for pesticide and herbicide use, especially in our ag-dominated areas, we have this conversation, but this is applicable to anybody who has land and is managing land. Some of those herbicides are okay to use near stream systems, some are not. And so make sure you're following the directions on that label.
Yeah, I always tell people just to err on not using things near a water
Yes.
body because they're so sensitive, and a lot of our organisms are really sensitive to chemical usage. So really just err on the side of back off and leave that buffer and make sure, that's where the riparian buffer really comes
Yes,
into place.
absolutely.
Yeah,
If you have the riparian buffer, you're not worrying about any of that, right?
right. Yes, exactly.
And the last goes right along with that sentiment, is to leave your streams be. Streams are naturally meant to have meanders. If you channelize or alter their stream flow in any way, which is really tempting to do, especially after we have flood events, right? It makes sense. It seems logical that if we pull some of that dirt and sediment out and pull some of our woody debris out, that it will flow easier and be less likely to flood. In reality, though, that's not actually how it works. You're actually more likely to see erosion, especially downstream, but also at the location where you've dug some of that out. And so while we might do debris removal, if we have major debris that is blocking some form of infrastructure, like a bridge or something like that, for the most part, the best practice is just to let it be. Don't change your stream system. The more you can leave that riparian buffer and allow that stream to access its floodplain, the better the results are going to be long term for flood reduction and water quality. Absolutely. But leave that stream be.
Yeah.
And I think those are my biggest things. Those are probably 80% of what I spend my time talking about.
I will tell you that, Michaela, I really love the graphic and handout that Division of Water has developed on one-step removal process, and if you have debris in the stream, how you can go about doing that safely, and what is allowed and what is not recommended. And so those are questions that we get a lot, and it's a complicated topic. I mean, maybe that's something we can talk about in depth later on, but it can get really complicated. I am just gonna first of all, I want to say thank you so much for joining us, Michaela. This is fascinating stuff. But before you go, just want to say Michaela is an alum of the Forestry and Natural Resources department here at UK. So can you give us just a quick blurb of how you got to where you are, where you started, and what happened along the way?
Yeah. So, long story short, I am a Vermont native who ended up in Kentucky just because I love horses. I know I'm one of those people, but I originally started in the equine science and management program, and I did finish that degree. But while I was there in my sophomore year, I started to think, I really think I need to do something that allows me to have a positive impact on my environment and the ecosystems that I really treasure. And so I took Tom Barnes' Wildlife 101 course as an elective, as still an equine major, my sophomore year, and I was hooked. From then on, I knew that this was the direction that I was going to go in. And it wasn't until later, though. I didn't originally start with an interest in freshwater. It wasn't until I started to do some research in the Price Herpetology Lab and through my coursework that I started to really fully understand that I may love these organisms, and I'm a herp nerd, so I love reptiles and amphibians. But the things that affect them most are going to be what's coming into their systems. Water resources are critical for most of our wildlife, and they're highly impacted by what's happening within their watershed. The land use, what's coming in, what do the riparian buffers look like? All of those things were critically important. And so that kind of led me to where I am today. I slowly meandered my way into a freshwater focus, and I haven't looked back since. So it's been really
Nice.
rewarding. I will say at UK, I did take the freshwater ecology course and Carmen Agaritis's stream restoration course. And those are two of the courses that I think I lean on the most in my career today. I can draw many different points where I'm like, oh yeah, I remember learning that. And I've leaned on those heavily and I really enjoyed them at the time. They really helped me develop as a professional.
Awesome. Well, I will stand by the thought that a meandering path, just like a meandering stream, is better than a straight one any day. So
For sure.
Michaela, yeah, thank you so much for sharing, all the information about how you work with the basin team and the basin coordinators and how you're going about that work to manage watersheds in Kentucky. It's really important work. It's complicated. Many people don't understand. And so we just really appreciate you being here and telling us more about it.
Well, thank you for taking the time to listen.
Yeah, thanks a bunch.
That was awesome. Thank you so much. We greatly appreciate that. And we did have a couple of questions though. They wanted to know, where's the list of water basin coordinators found? Is there any way we can
Oh,
maybe like find that and then put it in the chat pod, and then for the recording we'll go ahead and put the website up.
yes, absolutely.
So
Michaela might have a quicker access to that than I
she
do,
might, yeah.
but
And Michaela, I love when guests have went full circle. They're students, and now we're actually seeing them in their role. That it's just an amazing thing for us to see. Working in the Department of Forestry, we love that. We did have some comments too about sometimes people, they see that big picture, Amanda, that you had put, and overwhelms them. They decide to do nothing. But it's better to at least clean up a small portion of their stream than to do nothing. Is that right?
yeah.
Absolutely. Any little bit.
Hmm.
Yeah, I was just gonna just echo that anything you do counts. And Michaela, thank you for going through all those things that all of us can do. It does seem overwhelming. You kind of look, you might, go across a bridge and you look over and you're like, oh my gosh, who can do this? We have tons of examples of folks who just picked a little spot. They pick a place that's special to them. It's close to their home. It's accessible. It's convenient. And that's where they focus. I have, Michaela, you mentioned Dr. Carmen Agaritas. Carmen, every time I'm out in the field with her, she has a trash bag all the time, always has a trash bag. And so she can, that way, if she sees trash and litter, she just picks it up. And, when I'm out on a walk with my son, I just make sure that, I kind of show him an example to pick up trash. And, those are easy things that all of us can do. So, yeah, everybody can do something. It's just going ahead, taking action and, figuring out what is within your scope. And, maybe not right now, maybe it's in a couple years, but everybody can pick up trash.
Exactly. Well, we greatly appreciate both of you being on here. It was an awesome segment, and I'm sure we will have you on again.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks.
Thanks.
All right, wonderful segment today. Really appreciated all of our guests being on. We greatly appreciate Dr. Ellen Crocker talking about fall mushrooms, and we appreciate the two we just had talking about watersheds and how you can help with those. Every time we do a segments on From the Woods Today, we feel like it's something that could help you as a woodland owner. If you find anything that you would like to know about, maybe there's something weird in your woods and you're like, oh, what is this? Take a picture of it, go to fromthewoodstoday.com and send it to us. We might be able to have a segment. You never know. If you're asking that question, then probably someone else is too. So we greatly appreciate, you letting us know what you're interested in, because there's probably someone out there who wants to know that same topic. And I'm always looking for topics, so it helps me out as well. So we greatly appreciate it again. Remember, go to fromthewoodstoday.com. In about a week, this one will be posted, and you'll be able to see every show we've ever done on there. And we really appreciate you joining us, because if it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be doing this. So we thank you for joining us each and every week. Next week, we will be talking about prescribed fire and also some sweet topics with Kentucky maple syrup. So make sure to join us next week. We will see you all. Take care. Bye-bye.
From the woods today. From the woods today.